Hey, Kathy, will you text Darren and tell him not to call my phone no matter what?
Testing. Oh, that sounds good. It's great to see everyone here today, and this is such a beautiful, beautiful setting. I want to thank everybody here at Adams Breezy Hill Farm. Maybe we could give them a round of applause. I don't know about you guys, but we've had a great day in Western Kentucky, and it's so nice to finish up right here in Princeton. It's cool in here, it's hot outside, but we're glad to be together with you. I know that you have busy lives, and for you to take an hour of your time to be here with us is very important. We're so thankful that you're here. My name is Rachel McClevin, and I'm the Deputy State Director for Senator Paul. It's my honor to work for him. And I want to welcome you to this town hall for Caldwell County and tell you a little bit about how we're going to do this. There are some signs that are going around. I think we're back there with Judge Dunning, and I'd like for everyone to put your name and contact information there so that's a way for us to record your participation today. When Senator Paul makes some comments, we will then open the floor up to questions from the audience, and I hope that you'll have all of your questions answered and thinking about what you want to hear him talk about. But I would ask you to refrain from just strictly political questions. We're not going to talk about who's having a convention where or what's going on the presidential side of things. We just want to talk about issues that are important to you with regard to your federal government. Before there was our next speaker, I'm looking for Bobette Franklin. There she is. She's waving to us from up on that pretty little porch up there. Bobette is the Director of Constituent Services for Senator Paul. One of the first things he asked me to do when I started working for him was to help put together the best team of caseworkers in the state of Kentucky, and Bobette heads up exactly that. If you have a problem with a federal agency, let's say Veterans Administration or Medicare, Social Security, maybe you know someone who does have a problem with one of those agencies, see Bobette today, and she would like to help you get on the road to getting some questions answered today. So she's here to help you with that. You can even slip away from your seat and go back and talk with her for a few minutes afterward. But we would love to help you solve some of those problems. Without any further ado, I would like to ask Judge Dunning to come forward. Judge Ellen Dunning doesn't require an introduction. You're Judge Executive. We know that she is always great to work with. I see her often in the Area Development District meeting. I know she's has the best interest of this county at heart, and she's working hard for you guys. And I was honored that she said she'd like to make the introduction today. Judge Dunning?
Thank you, Rachel. If I can talk, but I do feel very honored to be asked to do this. I appreciate you contacting me, and we're certainly pleased to have the senator with us today. Rob, I'm not going to talk a long time, I promise. He wanted me to make a big long speech, but I'm not going to. I appreciate all you all coming. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to speak with Senator Paul and give him some of our issues, our concerns, but most of all just to let him talk to us. So I'm pleased also to have some of our fiscal court members here. We have Albert Bennett and we have Phillips back here. And we also have our esteemed judge from Lyon County, Wade White, and have you, Wade. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out today. It's definitely cooler inside than out today. I did bring you a check for $2.4 million. Now, I don't know if any bank's going to cash it, but it's money basically that I've given back to the Treasury. I think it's important that all of us try to figure out areas where we have money and see if we can turn some back in, because we borrow about $1 million every minute. We owe $20 trillion. Interest on the debt is a couple $100 billion. The only budget that I completely control is my office budget. So over the last couple of years, we have just been charging a little bit back in every year. We've gotten up to $2.4 million. And I think if we had everybody do that, if all the senators did that and all the congressmen did that, it would start to add up to real money. But you know what? If we had every civil servant do that, not just the elected officials, but everybody in government look for areas of waste. So for example, all throughout the federal government, nobody's really turning in. So what I proposed is a bill called Bonuses for Cost Cutters. So anybody who works for the federal government, if you'll turn money back in, would actually get a bonus, would actually get some kind of bonus, more money in their check. Because I think people tend to do things when they're paid more. If you work for a business and you cut costs and you make more of a profit for whoever you work for, you tend to get a bonus. So I've had this bill for a couple of years now, and I finally got it passed out of committee, but one of the opponents has been saying, oh yeah, I'll only vote for it, but not if it goes to the deficit. And I said, well, why? That's a big problem, this deficit. He said, oh no, I want it to be spent somewhere else. It's like that defeats the purpose of what's going on with this. If you look at the federal government, if you look at spending throughout the fiscal year, and you get to the last month of the spending of the year, they spend the money 5 times faster in the last month than any other month. Why? Because there's a phenomenon called use it or lose it. So if you're in the federal government and you're in charge of a $12 million budget, if you don't spend all of it, they won't give it to you next year. So to justify your existence, you spend it whether we need to spend it or not. But what if we did the opposite? And if you were in charge of a $12 million budget, you saved $1 million, and we gave you a $10,000 raise, that sounds like we could have the right kind of incentive of government. We've all seen this, what happens, and we saw it a couple years ago. You remember the husband and wife sipping champagne in Las Vegas and some big, bathtub, and they were having this great time out there, $1 million conference last month of the fiscal year, trying to spend that money. IRS, sometimes that's even worse. The IRS, is out there having us for more money, is out there having a vacation and a party in Las Vegas and having a big conference. But I think we need an incentive to try to save money, and I think this would actually work. If you look at spending, it gets more in the last month, but then if you look at the last month, they spend more each day. So spending gets faster as you go through the last month, and if you get to the very last of the fiscal year, as the sun rises in the east, they begin spending in the east, and it goes all the way across the continent, and they're spending it at LA at 5 o'clock Pacific time, trying to get as much money as they can spend. So we do have a real problem. Is that my helicopter already here? So somebody is coming in helicopter. All right. I hope that doesn't mean we have a problem. And but I think we have to look at what's going on. We owe the Chinese $1 trillion. We owe the Japanese $1 trillion. Our interest payments are a couple $100 billion. And people say, well, how are we going to, as a country and as a state, how are we going to keep jobs, in Kentucky? And I think one of the biggest burdens we have, one of the problems we have, is that our taxes are frankly too high. We have the highest corporate income tax in the world. 35%, that's what companies pay in our country. 35% is the corporate income tax. Well, in Canada, it's now 15%. So if you're starting a new company, you can be anywhere you want. Would you be in the U.S. or Canada? I mean, even existing companies, Burger King reincorporated and moved to Canada. We have companies that are reincorporated. They have a fancy name for it. It's called inversions. They're going to Europe, to Ireland. Throughout Europe, their tax rates are lower than our rates. So how do we compete with the world? If we're worried about losing jobs, I think we need to be competitive. So I think tax burden is one. But I also think regulatory burden is a big deal. How many regulations we place on our businesses. The Federal Register records the regulations we get. They add 80,000 pages every year. 80,000 pages of regulations. And when you look at sort of what the effect of this is, just think about close to home. We've lost 15,000 jobs in the coal industry in Kentucky. 15,000 jobs. Just this year, 1,500 jobs in the coal industry. They voted for any of that. Not one regulation has passed or one law has passed Congress. So in the 5 or 6 years that I've been there, we haven't done one thing to harm the coal industry, and yet they've been virtually put out of business by executive orders. It happens in both parties. Both parties have allowed presidents to get too strong. We need to get back the checks and balances where each branch of government is co-equal. Madison put it this way, he said we would pit ambition against ambition. The ambition of Congress to gain power would be checked by the president, and vice versa. So the biggest rule right now that's crippling the coal industry is something called the power plant rule. The Supreme Court, when Justice Scalia said the president went too far, he wrote a rule or wrote a law for the president's nomination. But they didn't eventually overturn it. They were going to hear it in a few months, and then Justice Scalia died. So now we have a court that's 4-4. And what separates the 4 people from the 4 people? I think at least 4 that are the more liberal justices believe that the majority should get what it wants. So if Congress votes for something, it doesn't matter whether the Constitution says it's okay or not, we're just going to let the majority do what they want. The problem is the majority sometimes doesn't do the right thing, and that's why our founding fathers thought that we should be constrained by the Constitution. Jefferson put it this way, he said, we will be bound by the chains of the Constitution. The Constitution says that the government can only do certain things. And if we obeyed the Constitution, we'd have a balanced budget every year. We have an amazingly wealthy country. We pay $3 trillion in taxes. I think if we just deal with $3 trillion with the government, we'd be okay. But we pay $3 trillion in taxes, but your government spends $3.9 trillion. So we have almost $1 trillion imbalance between the two. And a lot of it's eventually going to catch up with us. It is $7 trillion in the hole. Medicare is $35 trillion in the hole. So eventually, these chickens are going to come home to roost, and you know, what's going to happen to the person that lives just on a Social Security check? What's going to happen if there's no money? What's going to happen if we destroy the currency by printing up so much money paying for all these things that all of a sudden the money's worth nothing? It's happened in history before. We've had countries completely destroy the currency. We have a rich country. We have a lot of money that comes in. We can do a lot of things. There's a lot of things that can be provided for, but we can't do everything. And I'll give you an example where we need to make some decisions as a country. Everywhere I go, I don't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat, people say we want better schools, and there are things we need to do here in Kentucky. But then in Washington, they're sending you money to pave roads in Afghanistan. We've spent $100 billion on infrastructure in Afghanistan. Now, I think we should have gone after bin Laden. I don't think we can let people attack us on 9/11. I would have voted to go after bin Laden and attack them in Afghanistan where they were. But I wouldn't have voted to stay this long. We've been there 15 years. I'm glad we got bin Laden, but I just don't think that the job of our military or of us or as us as taxpayers should we build a country over there. One that never really ever been a country. I think we have to address threats to our country, so we will have to fight on occasion. But use our soldiers. I met a Navy SEAL about a year ago in San Diego, and he said to me, he says, look, we can go anywhere, we can kill anyone, we can do anything you want, and we're proud to serve our country. But he said, the mistake is when you ask us to plant a flag and create a country where no country exists. It really isn't a country about Afghanistan. There's about 5 different tribes that live together over there. They kind of live together loosely, but they never have obeyed the central government. Well, we don't have the resources to make them a government, or to make them a country, or to pave their country, or to build their schools. You're welcome to contribute personally to Afghanistan if you want, but we just don't have enough left for our country. And we're starting to rebuild some of our roads here, but we've got a lot of problems. We had a bridge problem not too long ago. You know, we have things that we need done in our country. We spent $15 billion in Pakistan. You know that some of these countries in prison are put to death Christians. And I introduced something about a year ago, and I said, why don't we pass a rule that says no money should be given to countries that persecute Christians? And they said, well, how do you define that? Well, I define it as putting Christians to death or putting them in prison for life for their beliefs. In Pakistan, if you criticize the state religion, you can be given the death penalty. And a Christian is on death row now. She's been on death row for 5 years. So I made the Court Relations Committee, and they voted me down 18-2. They voted to continue sending your money to countries that persecute Christians. They claim, well, we're going to give it to the moderates over there, and they're going to, do a better job and won't be as harsh on the Christians. And I said, well, why don't we withhold the money and tell them they'll get some if they change their behavior instead of giving them the money and expecting them to change their behavior. I probably wouldn't send it either way, but I just think it's insulting to us to have people that are persecuting Christians getting our money. We also need to see if they have our best interests at heart. But we spent $15 billion in Pakistan over the last 10 years, over $100 billion in Afghanistan, continue to give our best weapons to a lot of people who don't play like us. We continue to sell sophisticated weaponry to Saudi Arabia, and when our soldiers were there, they wouldn't let them have a Bible in Saudi Arabia. They don't like us. If you're a Christian, you can't even go to Mecca. You can't go to Medina. You're not even admitted to your cities. And now the 28 pages that were released have insinuated that some people in Saudi Arabia may have had something to do with 9/11. They kept it secret for 15 years, but they released it last week. We have an incredibly great country, rich country. We have a lot of stuff going for us. But we just have to figure a way forward that I think is pretty simple. We should spend what comes in. Same way, every one of you in this room only spends what you and what you have. And if you borrow money, you borrow for something like a house, something that for which the bank, keeps the sort of possession of until you pay them back. But none of us can borrow money for a rent. None of us borrow money to go to the grocery store. It wouldn't make any sense. That's where we are as a country. To pay our Social Security, we're borrowing that money. To pay Medicare, we're borrowing that money. We don't have enough money coming in Social Security to pay for those on Social Security. So we're going to have to figure out a way out of this mess. And it means making some tough decisions. The next generation, my generation, is going to have to wait a little longer. But if we don't, if we just say, oh, everybody's going to get it the way it's always been, it's going to go belly up and there won't be enough money. Within about 10 years, 25% short of having enough money to pay. And for people who live on that, it's going to be devastating. So we have to make some difficult choices as a country, but I think we can continue to thrive. We have a great deal of wealth, we have the rule of law, but it's fraying around the edges. I worry about police officers being shot. I worry about what kind of country are we going to live in if people think it's okay to shoot the police. And police are among you. They're your neighbors and colleagues, and they keep us all safe, no matter whether you're rich, poor, white, or black. The police are keeping us safe, and so we just can't let our civilization unravel where people think it's okay to shoot the police. Some problems and challenges to face, but I am optimistic that if we simply can do the right thing, spend what comes in, try to unburden our businesses, not be about envy, not being about thinking let's punish those corporations. We all work for people that are richer than we are. If we think we're going to envy those who have more than we have, we're going to punish them through taxes, we simply punish ourselves, and we punish those who work. If you've got a company here in the county and you want to punish them by having them pay more taxes, they'll have less jobs. We should all understand that. We're on the same side, whether we're an owner or a worker. But I continue to have a great deal of optimism for our country. If we see light and try to do what's right, I think we'll be fine. I want to be part of that, and I thank you for coming out today. Thanks very much. And I'll be happy to take questions, unless they're hard, then Judge Ellison. Yes.
Okay, I heard what you said about the, about all the billions of dollars that we spend overseas, Afghanistan and all that, and the problems that we have with Social Security. My question is, who's making these decisions? In other words, is it our elite in Washington? I mean, someone's got to make these decisions, knowing that we've got such a deficit in our Social Security and hundreds of billions of dollars overseas for, in a sense, nothing.
It's made by everybody up there. Now, I'm one who's voting against it, but the majority is voting for it. So, for example, about 2 months ago, I forced a vote on trying to take $8 billion from the Foreign Aid Fund and put it into the Highway Fund. Doesn't matter what party you're in, everybody kind of wants better roads and better infrastructure in our state. I got voted down like 75 to 20, three-fourths. Republicans and Democrats voted against me. And so I'm a minority up there, but I think I'm among the majority if you ask the people what we should do. So we have to get our representatives to hear us, and we need to get more of them who believe that first things first, we gotta take care of business here at home. And, it doesn't mean that we don't defend ourselves. I'm all for defending ourselves. I just don't think we have enough money to then start to create all these countries and create governments everywhere. Anybody else? Yes?
How can you, or how will you reduce the number of regulations? How can the Congress stop that from happening by non-elected officials?
I think there's a couple ways. One, I think we need to pass a law that says regulations have to be voted on by your representatives.
Okay, that's a good answer.
And so that we shouldn't let any president, I don't care which party they're in, we shouldn't let any president have the power to write the law. The law should be written by Congress, signed by the president, it takes a vote. The other thing we could do is I think maybe we ought to have some kind of reform for every new regulation you pass, you gotta look at 2 old ones and repeal 2 old ones. Because we keep adding on, nothing ever goes away.
That should happen without a law.
And some people have also said that maybe we should have sunsetting. So let's say we pass a regulation that after a year or 2 it expires, and the only way it would come back is to vote on it again. But there are a lot of different
Okay,
reforms.
we have Congress voting on it again.
Yeah.
Okay, a regulation not made by Congress.
Right.
It's just as.
It shouldn't be a long period. It should be unconstitutional. I agree with that. Anybody else? Yes.
In the law that we wanted to get passed about bonuses, well, didn't the Veterans Administration and giving bonuses to people that don't spend the money, they just denied services?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. The way the law is written, the one I want to pass, says that you have to complete your mission. So if you save money, it can't be by saying, oh, well, I'm going to deny service to veterans. It can't be that. Or if you're head of the Social Security Administration, it can't be that. What I'm envisioning is, let's say the Social Security Administration has, I don't know, $100 billion budget. Don't you think that there's savings like, why don't we buy less paper, buy less staples, buy different computers, get competitive bidding? That's what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about efficiencies. The government's so big that I think even little efficiencies could make a difference. If you were to cut 1% of the budget every year of the whole budget for 5 years, you balance the budget. It's pretty amazing to imagine that. So a lot of people say, oh, 1% is nothing, we'll never balance a budget, it'll never work. 1% every year balances the budget. And so we could find that savings, but not at the expense of cutting off services. So the way it's written is very specific. You have to do your job of what you're told to do. Visioning is, and I'll give you an example. One of the committees I'm on, when they changed over leadership, they discovered like a whole room of printer cartridges for computers that were 10 years out of date. But somebody knew the person selling them or just made a bad decision. If you had your business, you'd probably order them a month at a time. You wouldn't have 2 years worth of printer cartridges, but the government made a bad decision. So we have all these printer cartridges for computers that no longer exist. Sort of like having Betamax, government does silly things because it's not their money. There's a statement by Milton Friedman, and it's always one of my favorite statements. He says that nobody spends somebody else's money as wisely as their own. So your decision on spending your money will always be better than government's. Doesn't mean we won't have government, but it means you should have small government because they just don't have the wisdom because it's not their money. So they tend to be more reckless with their spending. Like for example, we loaned a company, Solyndra, $535 million and they lost it. It was a bad business decision, but somebody for political reasons says we want solar panels because they said they hate coal and they like solar panels. So it was a political decision. But if I would have asked you for the $535 million, your portion of it, you might have said, let me think about this and decide whether it's a good business venture because you lost all the money. The taxpayer lost all $500 million because the company went belly up. So, we just have to think it through. But there are protections in there so that people saving the money would have to do what they're supposed to do. It's more looking for competitive bidding, office supplies. But it adds up. I think it's not going to probably balance the budget, but I think it would help that we have the incentives working in the right way, not to spend it at the end of the year if you don't have a use for it. Anybody else? Yes.
You touched on something a few minutes ago that I've been very concerned about. I've been involved in investment banking for a number of years, and this tax situation was not. Our country's very uncompetitive, and that's the reason, one of the version you talked about, and I don't think people understand it very much. But what are we gonna do about things like the corporate tax free, and also things like the Dodd-Frank, being involved in banking, I understand fully, and all that's done, is to have unintended consequences to make the big banks bigger. And a lot of that stuff has not even been completed, and so therefore, it's really created some problems in the banks. And according to Wall Street Journal, the biggest portion of the loans are being made by companies that are non-depository institutions, which is not good, especially in an area like this.
So that was a big part of the crisis too, was that
That's right,
ones that were very
exactly.
unstable weren't banks necessarily.
That's it, I don't know.
Now, the Dodd-Frank were the banking laws that came after the crisis in 2008, when they thought the banking system was at risk, and these banks were so big that if they failed, the whole world economy would collapse. So they decided to make some rules, and some of it was well-intended, like having more cash on hand in some of the bigger banks. But the unintended consequence were tens of thousands of pages of regulations, which they said, oh, we're just talking about the big banks. Then they applied them to all the small banks. And so if you have a bank in Princeton, and then you have J.P. Morgan that has 10,000 banks, and you have one individual community bank, the compliance costs for J.P. spread amongst all their banks, and they can handle it. But the one bank here that has to hire one or two more people, or 5 more people, eats into their profit, and all of a sudden they're no longer profitable, and then they get bought out by a bigger bank. So it actually made the bigger banks bigger, and we set in place a regulatory agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that has no accountability. We don't give them money. That should be unconstitutional. You should never have part of the government that we can't vote to get rid of. They now get their money from the Federal Reserve. We cannot get rid of this group. That should be unconstitutional. If I think Justice Scalia were still alive, if we could get that to the Supreme Court, I think we might have been able to get that declared unconstitutional. It is a big problem. On the tax front, trying to be competitive, I think we just need to start lowering the rates. But to lower the rates to be competitive, we have to acknowledge that government needs to be smaller or your debt's going to get bigger. So if we lower rates, sometimes you can lower rates and get more revenue because people work harder when their tax rates go down. But some of it we have to acknowledge that government would have to spend less so we can get government smaller. But it's the answer. And in fact, when we did it in the 1980s, it used to be the individual tax rate was 90, then it was 70, and then it went from 70 to 50, and then it went to 28. So in the mid-80s, it went to 28, and lo and behold, we had more tax revenue coming in. The economy grew in 1 year in the 80s at a nominal rate of percent in 1 year. Now we're just hovering along at 1.5. And the difference between your economy growing at 1.5% and 3% is millions and millions of jobs. So we have to ask ourselves, this is an important question. We had one candidate for president who had enormous crowds, but he was preaching that we need to punish the corporations, that we need to raise the taxes on corporations. I think if we do, we'll have less jobs and less corporations, and those jobs will go someplace else. Because it's a worldwide economy, and if we tax our businesses too high, they'll leave, they'll move. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a committee for getting rid of old laws that's no longer?
No, it sounds like a good idea. I've been wanting to have a committee that would simply look at waste and waste. We do a waste report every couple of weeks. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples of where some of your money's going. NIH, which a lot of people believe the government could do some money for research in cancer. They also spend money on things like, they spent $500,000 studying why people like spicy foods. One of their conclusions was that people who like spicy foods eat more chili. Duh. In that same study, they took some money that was for alcoholism and addiction, and they spent it in studying why people like certain wines. Now, why money for alcoholism would be why people like certain wines is beyond me. But one of their conclusions was that wines have different qualities, and people have their own personal liking is why people like wines. Really? We spent money determining that? We spent a couple $100,000 studying Japanese quail to see if they're more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. So there's a lot of waste in government. We ought to have a whole committee that just goes through and cuts it out, but it keeps going on. I can remember as a kid, you remember William Proxmire? He was a senator up in Wisconsin. He had the Golden Fleece Report. And I remember all these terrible projects, studying all kinds of bizarre things about, that just are not worth spending any, but we still do it. So I've been looking at some of that money and trying to figure out, is there a committee we could put in place to have a rational person on the committee that can veto some of that money being spent? But we publish it, and if you, the email newsletter, that if you signed up for that email newsletter, we put out a waste project that we find almost every week or two. I think one of them we put out last week was 1.25 million spent on a Pakistani cartoon or an Afghan, I knew it was Afghanistan cartoon telling them why drugs are bad. Well, yes, I think drugs are bad, and that's fine, but we don't have 1.25 million to make a cartoon for people in Afghanistan. I think the show to teach them English in Afghanistan, except for the variety show was done in the language Dari. I mean, we're doing a lot of crazy stuff, and we should be mad at what government's doing as far as spending money, and mad that they're not spending it more wisely.
Yeah, especially when Afghanistan's #1 export is drugs.
Yeah, really.
It doesn't make sense to try to cut them off of drugs.
And the guy we put in as President Karzai, he had his brother made millions off the drug trade. Yes. Your question? Anybody else?
Well, I would like to say on behalf of the owners here that they've got a little food cart set up outside with homemade ice cream for sale, and I sampled it just to let you know it's delicious, so help
So
yourself.
don't head my way because I'm heading right there.
We're gonna go and get a little bit of ice cream.
That was a wonderful restaurant. Good luck.
Stay and
You-
visit.
you the owner? Who's the owner? All right. Well, we wish you guys the best of luck, and hopefully everybody comes back and eats here and helps the economy. Helps the local economy. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.